Hey everybody. So I'm sitting here with my good friend Sanjay. Sanjay is from Blume Ventures, and I'm very excited to be doing this live recording this with him together now. So Sanjay, first of all, it's great to see you. It's great to be here. Um, let's get a recap. We had you on the show quite a few months back in November.
Yeah.
And now we're sitting here in July 2019. Give us a recap of what has happened so far in the Indian startup ecosystem from then till now, and both on a macro and a micro level, in sense in the global startup, in the Indian startup ecosystem, and then individually what's happening in the Blume. So let's start off in the beginning of what's happening on the macro level of Indian startup ecosystem.
Sure. Thanks, Ephraim. First of all, it's fantastic to see you so passionate about India. You describe it almost as passionately, if not more, than many of us, early believers and staunch believers in the Indian ecosystem. An interesting data point. If you look at, my colleague Sajid Pai, who you might follow on Twitter, who writes pretty extensively, just did a very interesting analysis of Mary Meeker's latest report. And we heard from quite a few sources that when the first thing that came out was that there were 2 slides just dedicated to geo. The whole idea of geoification, the fact that you can put a mobile, almost a free internet mobile phone in every Indian's hand, not just in metros, but tier 2, tier 3 cities, rural India, or Bharat as we call it, right? I think that has really stood out. I mean, geo has been there for a while. And we've heard of, Netflix and, of course, Truecaller and its largest customer base being India. But Jio has just changed the game. The fact that, almost everybody has free mobile access, almost free, which is really interesting. I think that's been a change, but now it's become a phenomenon, right? I mean, it's called geoification. I think that's something that's new. The other is, I think, the return of B2B. Of course, India is a massive consumer market. You can't afford not to be there. It's whether you call it the next China or bigger than China itself, all that's true. Mm-hmm. But I think B2B, the fact that we've always had talented engineers. I think one of the interesting points that we write a lot about this is that when you looked at the return of talent flow, it was mainly at the founder level, right? You didn't have PhDs and data scientists at many levels below, and now you have that, and which is very important because they're actually coming up with cutting edge technology, not just keeping the lights on software maintenance. So I think the second point is the return of B2B. And if you think about also where a lot of the overseas capital is going, it's interesting that we're sitting here in New York and, a lot of the funds, the Stead Views and the Tiger Globals and the Falcon Edges, are right here in this block. And they're mainly looking, I wouldn't say mainly, but B2B is very interesting, right? From enterprise software to, deep learning and AI. And also fintech, for example, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's the second theme,
right?
And I think the third interesting point is there seems to be a lot of overseas interest that's looking again back at India based on fundamentals. Mm-hmm. So if you look at again I mentioned some of those names, but you look at the Chinese, who are looking very interestingly and aggressively at India. I think that's very interesting because they're basically seeing that there's so much headroom for growth. In not just in fintech, but in other areas like local content and agri-tech and fintech, of course, and healthcare. So we think of India. We've always thought, we've thought of India as the 2 Indias. One is really the built in India, for India, which is really the consumption model of the Chinese model, and the second is built in India for global markets, or the Israel model in one sense, which is really deep tech, product engineering built in Bangalore, serving global markets, right? So I think that second part is becoming more prominent in relation to where it was. Of course, consumer is huge. So I think geoification, I think the return of talent, and then of course, the budget just come out. We won't delve into details, but I think the fact that that startups are quite high on even Prime Minister Modi's government's budget, because he knows whether it is the tinkering labs, the Atal Innovation Mission. The fact that they're very supportive of Startup India, Stand Up India, all those also go a long way because it's creating this wave and this thought that, yes, startups are, we've talked about entrepreneurship is not a thing you can consider, but that you should consider as a first preference. These new the new role models are the Pavish at Ola, Samay at Grey Orange. So I think there's been a sea change, and I think never been a more interesting time, exciting time to be an entrepreneur.
Right. I mean, just phenomenal, especially everything you just mentioned, but in general, what's going on in India so far from 2019 beginning till now, tremendous amount of money has been raised, a lot of new unicorns. Blume has invested a lot, and we're going to go ahead into Blume. We're going to go ahead into Blume right now. And, from the last time we did an interview to now, Blume has announced raising a fund of 100 million, which in the process of almost closing. You had quite a few of your startups being acquired, acquisitions. You invested in a bunch of new startups, and obviously a lot of great publicity has been around. So fill us in what's happening at Blume and what you see going forward.
So I think what is interesting, what's always been very core to Karthik and me, and now the team, Ashish and the rest of the team that's joined us and are part of the senior investment and the platform team, is that we've always been very founder-centric and founder-first. I think, it's the other way around. I mean, because we have that, I think because we've got a stellar base of founders that we've backed, these others, the fund closing and the Draper partnership are milestones along that way. But it's really being founder-centric and being that sounding board and that year for founders that is, the most important. So I think if you look at the new Blume, a couple of things stand out. I think one is that today's, if you look at the evolution of us from a micro VC, $15 million or $20 million fund one to now what will hopefully be a $100 million fund three, we're just in the process of closing. By Q3 we should close. Is that the new Indian founder today is a little more seasoned. He wants to raise at least million to 2 million. Sometimes puts his own capital, or at least doesn't take salary or takes a salary pay cut, and has more skill in the game. Which means that we also have to play a little deeper, right? Because the round size is larger, so therefore the larger fund. The second point, the second interesting point is that when we started, we only had an office in Mumbai. You've talked to Sajid and Arpit, who lead our Delhi office, and for a long time we had then only the Bombay and Delhi office, and we still didn't have our own setup in Bangalore, even though about 50 to 60% of our portfolio at any one point is Bangalore based, and now we have a full-fledged Bangalore office. But we've also got to support that, we have a platform team. And the platform team has been very active in organizing. I mean, you're very active on Twitter yourself, and you see it's chai and chatter, right? Which is, what chai is. And it's basically, how can we help these founders in terms of sharing stories, in terms of sharing insights, where they hear from their peers, from founders who've sort of been there, done that. We bring in some LPs who are also successful CEOs who can do that. So we've been doing that actively, having CTO meetups, Chief Product Officer meetups. We've had, we had somebody like Deep Kalra, who's the chairman of Make My Trip and was a supporter, talk to about 8 to 10 of our Delhi-based founders. And we're finding that is also very, very core to what we do. But of course, we needed a full-time person to do it. So we have now a full-time community person. We have a dedicated business development, partnerships, alliances person. We have in-house growth and exits, which is really investment banking. So we've just seen that, your work really starts after you've cut the check. And I think that is a big part of what we do, right? It's not just about investing and spending time in the boardroom, but how do you actively help the companies with fundraising, with hiring. We've got a full-time team of, Sanam and a team called Passion Connect, which helps these companies with hiring. So I think that platform comes into play even more when your scale expands, right? Because if you only have 4 to 5 companies, then it's limited. But when you have more than 50, 60 active companies, it changes. Sure. And of course, it's I think key differentiator for Blume, but we're doing it also because it helps the founders the most.
Right. Now you just had Blume is having you announced yesterday the hackathon.
That's right.
The current hackathon. Yeah. So tell us about that.
So a lot of credit to the younger folks in the team, Shrey and Arpit, of course, who's the principal. The whole idea is that we've had this in the past where Grey Orange has had this. They call it like these midnight coding sessions where they just go marathon. Forget what the name is called, but they do that. And we just thought that'll be a really interesting way to bring in the best technical talent from outside, have technical mentors, CTOs there. And the idea is just to, leverage the Bangalore ecosystem and have these, tech geeks, if you will, the best of them, just come out and, show their best, and then, open that up to the ecosystem. So a lot of details to follow. I know you've seen details on Twitter, but I think that is really interesting, what we can do for the community and a lot of that tends to happen in Bangalore.
Like, I think it's amazing, like you said, especially with the Bangalore thing, that you have the house over there. You're always hosting all these chai events or she events, whatever you call it there. It's really, really incredible.
Yeah, it's officially called Blume Villa on Google Maps, and it's got a rooftop terrace, and it's the best way to do it. It's quite a modest bungalow. In Bangalore and Delhi, you have the advantage of trying these kinds of experiments, so that's worked well. And I think what we love to do is just connect the dots. And if you look at Constellation, their motto and their mantra, I remember the last year when we had the t-shirts, this thing was about connecting the dots, because that's essentially what we're doing, right? I mean, you've got ideas, you've got capital and people, and by building this platform, we can do all of that.
Sure. So one more last thing, where do you see currently the Indian startup ecosystem? There are a lot of the startups, like you mentioned before, the seed rounds are becoming larger checks. So it used to be a year and a half ago, $200,000 to $500,000, now becoming $1 million. At the same time, startups are raising a tremendous amount of money, almost the equivalent of the US market. And a lot of startups are thinking, instead of just, India, especially in the B2B market, in the SaaS game, they're thinking global now, right? So what are the next steps in the Indian startup ecosystem? Where do you see it going in the future? I guess the next year, as the year plays out, what do you think is happening?
No, it's interesting. Somebody was talking about at one of the conferences and panels, I forget which, but it's talking about, Flipkart and what it's done for the whole ecosystem. I mean, the fact that it showed that India can return money and show me the money at massive scale. Of course, it's only one. The flip side, I think what is interesting is I think what Flipkart showed was that, that India, the whole question about show me the money, right? That, okay, it's going to be the next China. It's got a massive, 300 million mobile phones and 1.2 billion people, but can you make money? That was the concern of LPs. It showed that money can be made on quite a massive scale. The interesting thing is, and also, at a conference, I remember somebody said, Indian entrepreneurs are not that ambitious. They're extremely ambitious, I'd say. We've got to go the other way and make sure that, they do one thing at a time, right? That you don't want to get to the unicorn, tomorrow. It's going to take some time to build that. So I think what is really interesting is today founders are thinking global. You just talked about that. Look at not only B2B startups, but even consumer. Oyo is thinking global. Ola has taken a license for, I think, Australia. I saw that. Zomato shut that down, but they had UAE was quite a big market. So you have even consumer startups thinking global. That's one. As far as B2B is concerned, I think what's interesting is I think today's startups are also becoming borderless, right? I mean, if you look at the distributed model, if you look at something like Locus or Grey Orange, let's look at two examples. Grey Orange, headquarters with a Singapore headquartered company. The core is in Gurgaon. The R&D center is in Boston, near MIT. Samay and the leadership team sit in Atlanta in the US. They've got another R&D center in Europe, and then of course Singapore. So the fact is that you're going to wherever your markets are. So I think on B2B, I think what there's a clear realization, which is also why we set up our sister entity, Arca Venture Labs, is that you develop your core tech and your product innovation from Bangalore, Delhi, or wherever it is. But your founder and the senior sales team has to be close to the market. Right? So I think that today there's a formula. I think a formula in a positive sense where there's a playbook to do it. And I think founders are becoming very educated, much better educated doing that. I think for consumer, there's a strong China pull, which is actually very interesting. We get asked about this a lot. What is the impact on China? I think it's positive. We see whether it's Cashify or MakeMocha or Vocal, wherever there's where the China linkages, they're exchanging insights and they're learning to scale at, from the China story. What are the lessons from the Chinese entrepreneurs there who succeeded? You don't want to emulate or copy them, but you want to learn from them. So I think there are these two pulls, right? Israel, we're still not plugged in fully, but I think the B2B pull to the Valley or to the US is very strong. And for consumer, the China and to some extent Japan and Southeast Asia, we're finding some startups actually looking and finding parallels between Indonesia and India. Young population, very high internet penetration, things like local content and travel, for example, there's some interesting synergy.
Sure.
So we're seeing also interest from Southeast Asian funds, growth capital, who are very interested in Indian startups.
Right. Sanjay, that's great.
Thank you.
Okay.
As always, a pleasure to meet you. And next time, maybe closer to home in
Like you said, any way I could be of help to Blume, reach out. I got you covered.
Thank you. Thanks.